Hi, Tara, can you hear us?
Me?
Can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay, great, we can hear you. I'm Sarah, I'm filling in for
Hi.
Jennifer. And I think we've got a good group of students here. So I think we're gonna wait just a couple more minutes. And then we're also trying to record this, so hopefully that's all right. We want to make sure that students who weren't able to come can still get the benefit of this.
Turn it off for a second. Is it easier to see me with the lights on or off?
You guys, what do you think? Off? Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Can you shut the door?
Oh, on this side too.
Cool.
Okay, what I think we're going to do is go ahead and get started, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
This is Tara. She's the Deputy Secretary for the Truman Foundation. She's going to give us some information about the scholarship that you all are hoping to apply for. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right. I am going to, whoa.
Sorry.
That's all right. That was very exciting. I'm going to go ahead and talk really briefly about three things. I'm going to talk about the Truman, what it is, and the Truman, why you want it, and then the Truman, how you get it. And most of what I'm going to talk about today is specific to our award, but a lot of it, frankly, would work if you're planning on applying for other things as well. So even if you ultimately decide Truman may not be the way for you to go, a lot of the advice I'm going to give about filling out the application and things like that is pretty general. So hopefully you'll find useful information in there. I have a feeling that I can see most of you, so if you have questions while I'm talking, feel free to raise your hand, but I'm hopefully going to have time at the end for some questions from all of you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay, so to start with, the Truman, what is it? The Truman is a $30,000 graduate school public service scholarship that is awarded to college juniors. It is designed for students who are planning on going on into careers in public service. We define public service broadly, so any plan that you have to work for a .org, a .mil, a .edu, or a .gov would be fine. Basically, the only thing that is off limits would be working for a .com. So that's kind of an easy way to think about it, and that's kind of the broad way that we think about public service. The application itself includes 3 letters of recommendation as well as a letter of nomination, a copy of your transcript, and then 14 very short essays, and then 1 policy proposal. And the policy proposal is something that is unique to our application, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. For the Trumans that are selected, we run a number of programs, and I actually think that our programming is probably one of the most important part of our scholarships, even our scholarship program, even more important than the money. We offer a leadership week, which actually happens at William Jewell College, so it's not very exotic for all of you, but we bring everybody out to Missouri for a week, and we spend time building a Truman community, but more importantly, kind of talking about how to create a path through public service. We have a graduate school fair, we offer advice and counseling, we talk about managing debt, and things like that. After that, we offer a Summer Institute, which is a year-long, that's a summer-long internship program here in DC. We also offer a year-long fellowship program for students that want to take time between undergraduate and graduate school. And then we offer a couple of other programs for our older scholars that relate to either getting a high-placed appointment in the federal government or running for public office. So those are sort of a quick overview of the programs we offer. The other important thing that the scholarship provides is a sense of community. We have an organized alumni organization that provides mentoring and counseling as well as professional and personal contacts for a lot of Truman Scholars. We're also a good sort of gateway to other graduate fellowships. We have a lot of our scholars going on to win things like Rhodes, Marshall, Fulbright, Schwartzman. So if you think that you're interested in some of those other programs, it's sometimes a good idea to look early at other fellowships opportunities because it's a good way to sort of position yourself. So that's kind of in general what our program is. I think the question then is, well, why to apply? And I think a lot of people just assume, well, you apply for the money. I just want to talk a little bit about that approach to fellowships, either ours or other ones. I think that if you spend time when you're looking at these fellowships focusing on the prestige or focusing on the money, I think the ultimate end to that is going to be disappointment. Because either you're not going to win and you will have spent so much time focusing on the money or the prestige that you'll have missed kind of the opportunities for growth that a lot of these scholarship competitions offer, or you will win and you'll discover that the money or the prestige wasn't really all that it was cracked up to be. One of the reasons why I talk a little bit about the Truman community is I think that the decision of whether to apply for our award should really be based on, do you see yourself as a member of this community? And if you look at the community of Truman Scholars and you look at the programming that you offer and you think, I could really fit in well there, I could really get a lot of advantage out of this, that's a great reason to apply. And the reason why I bring that up as why to apply is I think that will help you to be a better candidate. Frankly, we see all the time applications from students who are clearly kind of stuck on the prestige or they're stuck on the money, and you don't really get a good picture of the applicant, and oftentimes they're not competitive precisely because we're looking to build a community of future public servants, and that means we're looking for people who want to take advantage of all the aspects of our program and not just the money or the prestige. In terms of qualifications, there are no qualifications relating to major, so long as you're planning on a career in public service, we're open to any major. We don't have a minimum GPA. We don't have a minimum or maximum age for scholars. We're happy to have students apply who either want to study graduate school, study abroad, or who want to take time off between undergraduate and graduate school to either pursue other opportunities or are maybe open to other graduate education programs. The selection criteria that we state in the application is that we're looking for people who are who are able to demonstrate leadership, commitment to public service, and then finally academic success. And I can talk a little bit more about what those things are as it relates to our application. So I have put my notes to the side. So with respect to the application itself, what we look for is not always what's considered typical leadership. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm not the student body president. I mean, maybe the student body president is there. If so, that's great. But we are not always looking for the student who occupies a lot of positions of leadership. We're looking for students whose leadership is either taking an existing position of leadership and making it better, or expanding it, or helping the organization go through a really difficult time, or seeing a lack of leadership around an issue or in an area and stepping into that position. So when we talk about leadership in our application, we are not just talking about listing offices held. We're talking about actually taking those offices and doing something with them. So if you're in a position of leadership and maybe you share it, you're like one of 10 student senators or something like that. If any one of those 10 student senators could talk about a leadership experience in the same way that you are, that's not the kind of leadership experience we're looking for. We're looking for things that are unique, and we're looking for things that speak to your passions and speak to your abilities as a leader. With respect to public service commitment, again, we are not necessarily looking for the person who's involved in tons and tons of activities. We're looking for someone who maybe started out involved in a lot of things and has sort of whittled it down and gotten to the point where they are getting increasingly responsible or increasingly involved in maybe one or two things. That's not to say that if you're a person who volunteers at 8 organizations, you're not a good candidate, but it does create some challenges for your application, which I can talk a little bit more about if there's interest in that. With respect to academics, we are more interested in your transcript than your GPA. And what that means is that a student who comes to us who maybe doesn't have much leadership and doesn't have much in the way of service but has a 4.0 GPA is never going to advance in the competition. A student who comes to us who has really excellent leadership or public service abilities but maybe had a couple of difficult semesters or maybe started off in the wrong major, those students are the ones that we're happy to take a good look at because we're really more interested to see that a person has challenged themselves academically and even in some cases haven't necessarily had the easiest time academically, but that they've persevered and they've challenged themselves. We evaluate academics based on the graduate school to which you are planning to apply. So you just need to think about whether you're a good candidate for that graduate school, and so long as you are, your GPA really doesn't matter to us so much. I want to talk really quickly about the application itself. Has anyone there looked at the application yet? A couple of head nods. It's fine if you haven't, honestly. The application is fairly standard in a lot of ways, and then a little unique in others. We ask for basically your resume kind of chopped up into pieces, and then we ask for a series of essays. The first essay that we ask for is for you to talk about your leadership. That is a very common thing on all of these competitive fellowship applications, so I want to talk a little bit about what that means. What we're really looking for in these essays is for you to tell us a story. We are not interested in sort of hearing your thoughts on what is good leadership. I mean, we're kind of interested, but frankly, you only have a paragraph. And I'm much more interested in hearing what you did than what you think about an experience, because telling us what you did actually tells us a lot more. So when you're writing these essays, we like to see nouns and verbs rather than adjectives, because that very clearly tells us what you did, what the outcome was, who was involved. Telling us something was effective or was good or was outstanding, it really doesn't mean much. I mean, your outstanding and mine can be two different things. But telling us that you increased involvement in an activity by 20%, or you raised $10,000 for a cause, or you got 500 people to show up for an event, that does tell me something about your leadership and about what you've done. I think that one of the things that I notice in writing, I read for a number of these application processes, including Truman, and one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of times students want to downplay how much they do. So we see a lot of essays where there's a lot of we. The leadership essay on our application, and indeed any application that you fill out that asks about your leadership, should really be an I-focused essay. It's nice that you want to tell us what other people have done, and in some cases that's appropriate. But at the end of the day, you're the one applying for this award and you're applying alone. So it is really important that you're clear about what you did and what you did by yourself. The other thing that I want to sort of warn you against, and this is something that we all talk about, is the use of quotes. I think a lot of times people want to use quotations in these essays to sort of shortcut telling us what they think about something. Quite honestly, you know, my sort of smart remark to that is that Gandhi's not applying for a Truman Scholarship, so I don't really care what he has to say. But that's entirely true. I want to hear from you. I don't want to hear quotes that are attributed to, you know, everyone likes to use that "to whom much is given, much is required" quote as a cornerstone of an essay, and it just doesn't work. I'd really rather hear from you. from you yourself. The next essay that we ask you to write about is a satisfying public service experience. This essay actually usually doesn't give students too much trouble. Again, all of the sort of general writing tips I gave you with respect to the leadership essay applies here. You should be concrete and clear. You should use nouns and verbs instead of adjectives, and you should make sure you tell us exactly what you did. It's also helpful in this essay sometimes to explain to us why you thought this experience was rewarding. Now, a lot of these public service experiences are direct service between you and another person, and it's pretty clear why helping somebody directly would be rewarding. But for those of you, if anybody here is maybe a bench science person or a political science person, and your most rewarding public service experience involves spreadsheets and data, it is always helpful to tell us why you found that rewarding when somebody who's reading it might think it sounds kind of tedious. So just keep that in mind, and it gives you a good opportunity to kind of show your depth and show your abilities, as well as kind of telling us something interesting about you that you can find sort of something rewarding in an activity that many people might think is not very engaging. Our application also asks you to identify a societal problem that you want to work on. That essay is really important, and you're going to see a variation of this essay on a lot of applications. Frankly, it shows up in some ways on graduate school applications. I know it shows up in some sort of sneaky ways on other applications. Basically, we want to know where you see your life's work. And in order for you to tell us that, you have to come up with something that is narrow enough that we can see you making a dent in the problem. So sometimes we'll see a person who writes about poverty in South America. Too big, right? So I think you need to be thinking in terms of where can I have a discrete impact and what makes the most sense for me. And that may mean that you're writing about an issue that's local. That may mean that you're really interested in poverty, but for right now, the way that you're going to dial into that is working with women in poverty or working with veterans in poverty. Just make sure that whatever problem you select is one that's discrete enough for you to grapple with. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means when we get to the policy proposal. But for the purposes of our application, one of the things that we look to this particular essay for is to see, does this student have the ability to work on this issue? So if you write to us about issues relating to juvenile justice, let's say, but there's not really anything in your application leading to this point that shows that you've either worked with children or with the criminal justice system or with incarcerated persons, that's a problem. It might be that you absolutely have the intellectual ability to work on the issue, but without the evidence to back it up, it's really difficult for us to select you as a Truman Scholar or even to select you for interview. So when you're working on your problem statement, make sure that it is one that is narrowly tailored enough that we can see how your experiences have led you to this point and gotten you interested in this issue. So once you've told us about the societal problem you want to work on, then we ask you about your graduate school plans. And this part of the application is one that I think you're going to see the most often. So a lot of the advice I'm going to give you here is very general and can be applied to a lot of different applications. We are looking for the best graduate school plan and the best graduate school program for you. So spending a lot of time kind of convincing us why a program is the number one program or why it's received accolades in all these areas is really not very helpful. Particularly because in our case, you're selecting a public service program. And I'm telling you that there is right now no comprehensive ranking of many of the public service programs out there. Masters in Public Administration's programs, those do have a ranking. But just about any other program, law schools are ranked not based on public service. So spending a lot of time telling me you want to go to the top ranked law school doesn't tell me a thing. All it tells me is that you've read a perhaps cunningly persuasive admissions brochure. The other thing I want to tell you about applying, writing about what graduate school you want to go to is keep in mind that everyone who's reading our applications is either a graduate school admissions professional themselves or has already been to graduate school, probably the program that you're writing about. So spending a lot of time kind of going over the nuts and bolts of when you go to law school, you study contracts. When you go to medical school, you learn about the parts of the body. It's not helpful, and it winds up wasting your time. When what we really want to hear about is what you're going to bring to that graduate school program and what you specifically plan to get out of it. And it is fine if you don't know the answer to that question. Maybe it's pretty general at this point. Maybe you know that you want to go and you want to get a medical degree, but you're not exactly sure what kinds of electives you want to take or what sorts of experiences you want to have. It's okay if that's the way you feel right now, but before you start writing applications about your burning desire to go to medical school, you need to rethink what you think you're going to get out of that experience. Because I often find that when students don't know how they're going to take advantage of a graduate school program, that sometimes means that's not the right program for them. So this is a good example for you to sort of reflect on what you want to get out of a graduate school program and what you believe you can take to that program. And that's what we want to hear about. The next two essays that we ask you to write relate to your career after graduate school. And the advice I'll give you on these is the same for both. You need to be specific. So telling us that you want to be a international development professional, it doesn't mean anything. You need to tell us where specifically you want to work and what things you want to do that are unique, that show leadership, and that show your ability to be what we call a change agent. So basically, at this point, we are thinking about the problem you told us you want to work on, and now we're looking at your career goals and saying, well, how are they going to have an impact on that problem? I think that in this area, the biggest issue we see is that students are not ambitious enough with their goals. They will sort of set out to be a high-functioning administrator at a government agency. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm one of those people. It's great. But what we want to see in this application is when you're in that position, how are you going to make things different? How are you going to shake things up? How are you going to make a change? I think the other thing about these essays is they're aspirational and they're also not binding. So if you're thinking at this point that you're really interested in career trajectory X, but you also might be interested in career trajectory Y, that's fine. What we want to see here is we want to see you articulate one of those two paths and explain to us why you would be the best person for it and what you hope to accomplish in it. A lot of Truman scholars write these essays, and at the end of the day, they wind up changing their mind and doing completely different things. That's okay. But this is meant to be an exercise in you looking at an issue and looking at a problem and thinking about how best to affect change on that issue or on that problem. So we do need for you to kind of lock down one thing or another, keeping in mind that we're not going to punish you later if you decide you want to change your mind. The next aspect of our application is the one that causes the most sort of consternation, and that's the policy proposal. We ask you to, in 500 words, basically solve a problem. And for those of you who are not in sort of a public policy or political science background, even the way that it looks is off-putting and terrifying. So I'm here to tell you right now, the policy proposal should not give you a lot of anxiety because it, quite frankly, will not keep you from making it to an interview. In some cases, I've seen it not even keep a student from winning. I've seen some scholars that we've selected who have had not very good policy proposals. So don't, by any means, if you decide you don't want to apply for 100 other reasons, that's fine. But please don't decide not to apply because of the policy proposal. Basically, all we're asking you to do is come up with a policy that you think is going to make the problem that you discussed in question 9 better. It should be narrow enough that you can talk about it in 500 words and that you know enough about it that if you're questioned on it during an interview, you can hold your own. It should not be so narrow that there is no way for a reasonably educated, inquisitive human being to want to talk to you about it. I have seen incredibly narrow policy proposals. We had a young man win a couple years ago with a policy proposal that related to a tiny island that was sinking somewhere in the Pacific. It was really hard to ask him questions about that. But I think that in that case, you know, when you're dealing with someone who is essentially a bench scientist in training, that is a specific case. For the majority of people, defining something sort of narrowly, either in terms of region, so let's say you want to talk about malaria abatement in Francophone Africa, or let's say you want to talk about child trafficking in Eastern Europe. That's fine. That's usually sufficiently narrow that you can deal with it in 500 words, but not so narrow that people can't really talk to you about it. The other thing you can do is if you're interested in, say, education, maybe you want to write about specifically arts education. So you need to come up with a policy or a proposal of some change that you think will make this issue better. And the proposal itself, it can be your own creation. It can also be something that someone else has proposed and basically you're just talking about how to get support for it. Either of those is fine. Just be clear if you're using someone else's idea that it is not your own idea. And also be aware that if you're using someone else's idea, there may be movement on it during the course of your application. We've had some people come in with policy. We had someone not that long ago come in with a policy that was essentially rendered moot by a Supreme Court decision the day before. That's okay. We recognize that this is in some ways an academic exercise. After the policy proposal, we ask for a copy of your transcript, which we talked a little bit about earlier, and then 3 letters of recommendation. The letters of recommendation should loosely correlate to the following different criteria. 1, you should have someone who's able to write about your leadership, and specifically about what you wrote about in your leadership example. Now, this doesn't mean that the person who writes your leadership essay had to be sort of by your side and holding your hand for the entirety of your leadership example that you're writing about, but it should be somebody who's at least aware of it. One of the things I always suggest to students is when you are requesting this letter from someone, you might want to include a draft of your essay and say, this is what I say is my most significant leadership achievement. I'm asking you to write about leadership in this essay. Could you please mention this? Could you please talk about this? I write letters of recommendation all the time. Quite frankly, the student who comes to me and hands me a resume with draft essays and says, this is what I want you to write about, that student is my favorite student. Everyone loves the help. I don't know many letter of recommendation writers who would not be delighted to write given those kinds of directions. The second letter of recommendation should be from the talk about your public service commitment. And again, this person should at least be able to mention what you write about in question 8. The final letter is your academic success letter. For most of you, that is pretty straightforward. It should come from a professor. We don't particularly care if it's a full professor, assistant, or associate professor, but it should be someone who knows your academic work well and is able to speak with some confidence about whether you're likely to get into the graduate school to which you plan to apply. That letter is usually pretty straightforward. If any of you have academic situations, maybe you've had courses that have been particularly difficult or you've struggled with certain things, you may want to speak with your faculty representative on campus about whether that letter needs to be addressed in a particular way, and then they can always ask me those questions, or if you want to ask them now, I'm fine to answer them about things like that and how they should be dealt with in those letters. In terms of who you select as your recommenders, we are always impressed by people who know you well. We are never impressed by fancy names who don't. We get letters from all kinds of people. There are people who read for our applications who have received letters from the Pope, who have read letters from Bono, who have read letters from most sitting presidents. It is rare that those letters are impressive because oftentimes they don't know the person who they're writing about. So please make sure that when you're selecting your recommenders, you're selecting them based on who can write best about you rather than who is most prestigious or who you think is most impressive. That advice is specific to my award, it's specific to Truman. That may change if you all are applying for other things, but with respect to Truman, that's really important to us. So before I open it up to questions, I just want to encourage all of you to really consider Truman. It's a great program. I was a Truman Scholar myself back in '93. We have people come in here all the time who tell us that Truman has changed their lives. Just today I posted on our website under the Scholars section a bunch of videos from some prior Truman Scholars who talk really convincingly about how this award has made their path through public service easier, different, better, and it's something that I really hope all of you decide to do. If you decide not to do it, I would encourage you to still look at our application anyway, because our application forces you to walk through where you plan to go in a really concrete way. And I think you'll find that it's helpful regardless of whether you decide to apply for Truman or you just decide to apply for other things. I will tell you that in my undergraduate career, applying for the Truman, not winning it, but applying for it, was the single best experience I had. I learned a ton about how terrible of a writer I am. I learned a lot about how to express myself and how to talk about my achievements. And I learned a lot about what I needed to do to position myself to get to where I wanted to go. And that's a hugely valuable lesson. So I really encourage those of you who even decide this isn't the award for you to look at that, particularly if you're planning to apply for other things. But with that, I'm happy to open it up to questions or comments or anything that you all have.
If you guys have questions, if you want to come up so that she can hear through the mic. Any questions at all?
I promise I'd answer anything. It's rare if you get somebody who's like, any question, I'll answer it, but.
This is great insider information, so this is our chance to find out all the inner workings.
And I can barely see your faces, so I wouldn't even know who asked.
Okay, well, it looks like we don't have any questions for the moment. So thank you so much, Tara, for taking time out and talking with us and giving us this really important information for the Truman Scholarship as well as for other fellowships.
All right, great. Well, if any questions occur to people, just forward them to me. I'm happy to answer them.
We will definitely do that. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.